Well, good morning and welcome to 2 Timothy. Our reading today is from chapter 1, verses 1 through 7. As I read our text today, a strange thought struck me. I think Timothy must have been a Methodist. Now, wait a minute, stay with me. For sure, there's no mention of it in the scriptures, but I really think he might have been a Methodist. I say that because of the description that Paul gives regarding his conversion. It sounds like it may have been an old Methodist camp meeting. Can't you see it unfold in your mind? Timothy's mother and grandmother, both of whom were probably officers in the UMW, made sure that they exposed young Timothy to the teachings of the apostles, especially the Apostle Paul. Now, I can see the three of them in my mind as they're walking down that old sawdust trail with the pre-revival music wafting through the air. And then when the time comes, Paul stands up and begins to preach the word. Now, we know Paul well enough by now to know that he had a tendency to preach for a long period of time. If that isn't proof enough that it's a Methodist gathering, then I don't know what it is. You don't have to believe me, though. Just ask Eutychus. You say, Eutychus? Where are you going with it? Eutychus. He was a man in Acts 20 who fell asleep while Paul preached all night. Now, next time you think that the minister's sermon's running a little long, just remember Paul preached all night. Eutychus actually fell out of a third-story window to his death. Paul went down and performed a miracle, and Eutychus came back to life, and as soon as they got him squared away and they broke bread, Paul continued to preach till dawn. Well, just a little humor. But putting all the kidding aside, Paul presents Timothy as one who was well instructed in the faith because of the legacy of two women who apparently raised him. In this letter, Paul takes great care to point out to Timothy, a young, timid, but gifted minister, that he must focus on staying strong in the faith. Some have said that this letter of Paul's is like his last will and testament to Timothy, and we'll see more about that as we read through 2 Timothy if you've never done that. As in 1 Timothy, Paul speaks to what is required for a congregation to be faithful to God. But in 2 Timothy, Paul makes a shift, and he speaks to what it needs, what the minister needs to be faithful to God. What Paul describes is how Timothy must be intentional about keeping his faith on track. Paul was intentional. We've already talked about that as we read through 1 Timothy. Well, here in verses 6 and 7, Paul says, "For this reason I remind you to rekindle the gift of God that was within you through the laying on of my hands. For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline." Those are Methodist words. In other words, just as we have seen Paul's intentionality in 1 Timothy, Paul expects Timothy to show the same. Apparently, it was well modeled by his mother and his grandmother. I'm curious, How intentional are you in living out your faith? How intentional are you in keeping the gift of God rekindled? What kind of spirit do you bring to the work of the Lord? Well, it's an old quote, and I don't know who first said it, but it goes something like this: nothing changes until something changes. Well, if we were to insert our names for Timothy's, what would we say in response to Paul's words? How have we done at rekindling the flame? Having the boldness of Paul and Timothy doesn't just happen. It comes as a product of faithful discipleship. So, consider these questions. Who was your Lois and Eunice, and how did they lead you to Christ? Question 2. How are you rekindling the flame of faith? Question 3. Where do you lack boldness for the gospel, and what are you going to do about it? Well, have a great day. Be a blessing to others as God has blessed you. In this new normal we're living, be the church in changing times. Go in peace.